Huh?
All right, I'm going to ask our panelists to please come up, please.
Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. How's everybody? ¿Cómo estamos todos? Good. Friday. Awesome. So I know today's topic, I think, is quite heavy because we're going to talk about the negative impact of Texas anti-immigration laws. And so I'm sure throughout the panel, there might be moments where the conversation can get a little heavy. Take care of yourselves. You know, if y'all need to step out, please do. If y'all need to use the bathroom, it's over here to the left. You know, take care of yourselves, including for the folks that are watching us online. This event is going to be in English. Este evento va a ser en inglés, pero si necesitan información en español sobre la SB4, pueden visitar las páginas de LUPE, igual como las de Texas Civil Rights Project, que tienen contenido en español explicando de estas leyes. But we'll go ahead and get started. First, I wanted to give everybody a brief overview of what is Operation Lone Star and what is SB4, because I think most people, what we see on the news is very curated images of what's happening at the border. We see videos that are often provided by law enforcement, and the people that you sometimes rarely get to see are, like, for example, the folks that are on this panel or what they get to see. And so we're going to start with a series of videos that were created by a coalition of organizations called End Lone Star that I think do a really good job at covering what is Operation Lone Star. And the second video is really important because it covers how each of us, through our tax dollars, are actually contributing to this, the billions of dollars that are getting poured into these operations while potholes go unfixed, our schools go underfunded. Healthcare is super expensive. I am feeling blessed that I got to see a dentist this month, you know, and meanwhile, billions of dollars get poured into these operations. And so we'll start with the first video.
In March 2021, Texas Governor Greg Abbott launched a border policing program called Operation Lone Star. Under this program, up to 10,000 law enforcement officers work at the Texas-Mexico border to arrest migrants. And that looks like this. This is happening in these border counties. In Kinney County, more than 1,300 people were arrested in 2021 for allegedly trespassing on private ranches. Courts have thrown out hundreds of cases like these because they lacked clear evidence. Today, around 800 people are in jail waiting for court hearings. Many have been there for months. Others have been deported without being allowed to seek asylum, which violates U.S. law. But this program doesn't just affect migrants. Law enforcement officers are spending much more time on patrol in border counties. As a result, traffic warnings in border counties have increased by 100%, and police citations by 42% in comparison to 2019. High-speed car chases are also on the rise, linked to 30 deaths since the start of the operation. Black and brown U.S. citizens in border areas are disproportionately targeted by Operation Lone Star, with many people feeling at risk in their own communities.
in the middle of the night, there may be cars speeding down the highway. And actually, there was an incident where a police car crashed into a building. I don't understand how we can be okay with that kind of dangerous situation for people in our community.
Many communities in Kinney County live below the poverty line and lack basic provisions. The county has received more than $3 million, but only for Operation Lone Star. This is money which is not helping to ease the water crisis or fix unpaved roads or school buildings. Join us at endlonestar.com to help end Operation Lone Star.
And then we'll go to the following video.
Operation Lone Star will get more funding from Texas using state resources.
$495 million,
Another $500 million.
$1.3 billion.
More than $4 billion.
In March 2021, Texas Governor Greg Abbott launched Operation Lone Star, a border policing program that aims to limit migration across the Texas-Mexico border. The operation has become one of the most expensive border militarization programs in U.S. history. An enormous amount of money is needed to fund the deployment of thousands of state troopers, the Texas National Guard, and local law enforcement to the border. Operation Lone Star has cost Texans over $4 billion in state funds since it was launched 18 months ago. That is more than what the state spends on the child welfare system and the juvenile justice system combined, and more than the $3.4 billion allocated to help homeowners afford the spike in gas bills after last winter's energy crisis. So, where does this money come from? Funds for Operation Lone Star come from other state agencies. Governor Abbott used emergency powers to divert about $1 billion from the federal COVID relief fund to top up the $3 billion the Texas legislature gave to fund Operation Lone Star. Texas is misspending this money that could be used to fix the electrical grid, support children in need, or expand access to medical and mental health care. Join us at endlonestar.com to help end Operation Lone Star.
So at that website, endlonestar.com, they have a lot of videos in Spanish as well that explain Operation Lone Star, and have also some really neat maps where they've issued even travel advisories to certain counties. In the maps, if y'all look at them, you'll notice that the 4 RGV counties aren't highlighted on there, even though we still are over-policed. But that's because of a lot of local efforts that went to ensure that the county judges didn't sign on to certain disaster declarations. But today what we're going to talk about through the panelists that we have here is the effects of this in the Rio Grande Valley. I think perhaps because we live here and we see this all the time, sometimes we can become immune to it or sometimes desensitized to what's happening at the border, but it should really infuriate all of us. You know, what is being done with our public funds, what is being done in our name, and what is being done just miles of like where all of us live. And so I'm going to I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, but we have an amazing set of community leaders who are resisting these anti-immigrant attacks from the state and working directly with asylum seekers and immigrants in the Rio Grande Valley. And so I'll pass over the mic to each of you to introduce yourselves.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Aron Thorn. I'm a senior attorney at the Texas Civil Rights Project. We're based here in Alamo, and we work both in the courts and out of the courts on border militarization issues, including SB4 and Operation Lone Star.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Rangel-Samponaro. I am one of the directors of the Sidewalk School. We work mainly in Matamoros and Reynosa, Mexico. We have schools in both cities. We have clinics in both cities. We built a shelter in Reynosa for children asylum seekers and their families. We assist all the shelters in both cities. And we also monitor the bridges in both cities. And we also are the ones that pass out information from the U.S. government whenever they change new laws or policies to all of the asylum seekers in both cities.
Thank you. My name is Sergio Treviño. I work with LUPE, la Unión del Pueblo, Entero, a community organization that has roots with the United Farm Workers. Our members have been living here for generations sometimes, and Also new incoming immigrants who are learning about civic engagement and our rights, and making sure that we're participating in the process of where allocated funds go to. So it's important for us all to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you all. And the first question is for Felicia of the Sidewalk School. So your organization works daily to provide humanitarian aid among many, many things to people who are seeking asylum. I know you all started as a sidewalk school, literally on the sidewalk, hence its name, for the children, right, who were there as a result of when Trump started completely dismantling asylum, but y'all have expanded so much. Recently, Attorney General Ken Paxton sued faith-based organization Annunciation House in El Paso and falsely accused them of human smuggling, seemingly an attempt to shut down their life-saving programs. Could you tell us more about what Ken Paxton is doing, and why do you think he's targeting humanitarian aid organizations?
Sure. So I guess people need to be aware of what he's alleging Annunciation House is doing. So he's smuggling asylum seekers because they're transporting them. And they're a stash house because they're a shelter. That's how silly this is. And he's targeting humanitarian aid organizations to scare us, to make us stop doing what we're doing. Now, if you're asking all shelters in the US to ask all people who come to them for shelter or food or to go to the bathroom to show me that you're an undocumented American, that's ridiculous. And that's something no shelter or organization on the US side is going to do, because you're there to help people. You're not there to ask to prove to me you're an American citizen. You're there to help them in their time of need. So he is doing this, the state of Texas is doing what they're doing to scare humanitarian organizations and hope that we will all stop. Annunciation House, sadly, Ruben Garcia, the director of that organization, the shelter, has already had some volunteers quit because they're scared of being charged with a crime because they fed people. So in a way, it is working, unfortunately, and it is scaring off volunteers. I can go on a whole rant, but I will not. But that's why they're doing what they're doing. And I hope Aron takes over, explain more of what SB 4 is and how part of it has already passed. Because I wasn't even aware of the smuggling part, which is what he used to go after Annunciation House. And then the part that's coming up, or they still haven't made a decision, which is racial profiling. So if you're brown or black, we're going to have a serious issue here in our own community, because then officers will be able to stop us and ask to prove to them that we're an American. How do you prove that? What do I show you to prove to you I'm an American? The language is so ambiguous that they're using that the officer, however he feels, no matter what I show you, you can tell me that's not enough, and I'm going to walk you back over to Mexico, a country you may have not ever been to before. I don't speak Spanish. I work over there, though. So if I ever got put over there, I'm out of luck. I mean, I have 2 buildings to go to, but for people who do not, you would just be wandering around because you have no idea where you are. You've never been there before. So brown and black people, whoever come to Texas, all need to be worried. This affects you if you step into our state. And we are the beginning. If this works, this will go up and it will spread out across the US. We are what, patient zero. We are the beginning of the racism, the open racism and discrimination against minorities. I have said this in many interviews, and I will say it here today. I don't see any protest at airports. No, there's no protest at airports telling people to get back on the plane and go back where you came from. There are protests here at the border with minorities, people who do not have the resources. That's where you see these protests. But if you have money to buy a ticket and get an apartment when you get here, I see no protest at the airport. So if you feel that way truly about asylum seekers, then make it fair across the board. Protest everywhere. Tell everyone they are not welcome here, not just brown and black people, which is exactly what they're doing.
Thank you, Felicia. And I saw this, I think it was, I saw it on Instagram from one of the news sites about how, for like Ukrainians, for example, the government has been able to set up a very swift and easy way for tens of thousands of them to come over and immediately get to work. And Ukrainians are predominantly white, right? And so it's like the government can, if they're willing to, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Could we go to the next slide, please? And this next question is for Aron. You work with a legal organization that is challenging SB4 and other anti-immigrant laws in court. Many who are looking at what Governor Abbott is leading are questioning, isn't managing immigration and the border the role of the federal government? In one very tragic moment in your Eagle Pass earlier this year, state agents physically denied access to federal agents to respond to a distress call, and 3 people drowned as a result of that. Could you speak about Governor Abbott's legal approach to pass such extreme legislation, and what role should the federal government play in this scenario?
Yeah, I could give a whole separate presentation on this. But as Felicia mentioned, I think principally, I don't even want to call it a legal strategy, right? Because this is at its heart a political strategy. And we haven't just seen it in immigration, we've seen it in other parts of, social justice movements for trans folks, trans children. We've seen it in the reproductive space. And it is essentially a political messaging forward agenda, regardless of what that actually means for the rule of law, right? That essentially is the state of Texas's MO now. TCRP participated actively in the legislative session when SB4 was passed. So there are 2 SB4s that I could get into detail after if folks are interested, but essentially there are two different bills, right? There's a smuggling bill that increased the penalty for human smuggling to 10-year mandatory minimums. Human smuggling is not sending somebody across the border, but it's actually just driving someone from point A to point B. Can now be, if you're convicted, you will now spend a mandatory 10 years in a Texas prison for that. The average age of a smuggler in Texas is 26 years old, and they are overwhelmingly brown and black men from the Houston and Galveston area who are going to be facing those penalties. SB4 creates new criminal penalties and also allows Texas peace officers to drive folks to the border and ask them to return, right? All of these proposals were taken to task for the almost laughable inefficiency on the ground, right? Driving somebody to a port of entry and just requesting for them to cross, right? You're not going to push them over the border. You're not going to force them over the border. Like, it sort of does not work at all in reality, and it's not the point, right? None of these things are the point. A house getting sued is not about human trafficking, right? Ken Paxton is also sending tons of information requests to other organizations doing this work, organizations working in the reproductive justice space. The political motive of the state, right, is to make as much chaos and obscure of as much of the truth as they possibly can, because that is where their political agenda really takes off, right? It takes root in people. If people are like confused and scared and they don't understand what's happening, they're going to sort of make decisions in that type of environment, right? And all of this $1 billion project, in the last legislative session, this money, they didn't even need the COVID money. They allocated almost $7 billion of Texas state tax money. None of the Fed's money is going to this. All of our money is going to this, right? $7 billion that could have been used for any number of things, right? So that's Texas's goal. And I think a second goal that you see, particularly with Texas, as it is challenging the authority of the federal government, not just in immigration, by the way. There are other areas in which the state and the feds are fighting in court about who has like true control over an issue. But immigration is so controversial and so misunderstood and so easily used as a weapon. It's like ground zero for this battle between the state of Texas and the federal government. Our, federal system, we can talk about whether it's worth saving or not, but Texas is trying to dismantle it, right? One of the ideas about there being a federal government that has certain rights and responsibilities and state governments that have others is that there are certain things that we decide that the federal government should have full control over, right? It's just the best idea for the federal government, one government, rather than 51 governments, right? 50 states and the feds, to have their own set of laws on a certain issue, because immigration touches on foreign policy and it touches on our international agreements and all kinds of different things, right? It's not a good idea to have Texas decide that it's going to have its own immigration policy and Illinois is going to have its own immigration policy. But what Texas is doing is effectively asking for that, right? It says, I don't care what the Constitution says about what goes to the feds. If I don't agree with what the federal government's going to do, I'm going to use my chaotic, evil agenda to attack it, right? And I'm going to file all of these lawsuits to fundamentally challenge the supremacy of the federal government. And that kind of environment, whether it's about immigration now, right? But it will bleed into other issues that are, fundamental to the way that other states run, the way the federal government runs. Like this agenda, this MO, right, will show up in other parts of our life in Texas and the life of folks in other states. And if a state is able to bully the federal government like this, it will have repercussions for the entire country. Like Texas is the laboratory. And we have this phrase in the law that states are the laboratories of democracy. They allow us to do little state projects and see if they'll work. Texas is the laboratory of challenging federal authority writ large, and that could have a tremendous, impact on the rest of the country for decades to come.
Thank you, Aron. I think what comes up is also voting rights, right? And how the state is also trying to suppress and dilute so many Black and brown votes, and really challenging, right, what the federal involvement in our elections and voting rights are. My next question is for Sergio. You work with an organization that organizes immigrants who have lived here already for years or even decades. How has Operation Lone Star and new legislation impacted the families that LUPE works with? And what are you hearing from them, and how's LUPE responding to their concerns?
Thank you. Can you actually change the slide?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So as I mentioned, LUPE is a community-based organization. It's a membership-based organization. So our members tell us what's important to them. We offer immigration services for people who are trying to transition to residency and become citizens. But a lot of times there's not that pathway to citizenship. So when they're coming to LUPE, they're coming with a hope that there's something that they can do to protect themselves, to protect their family. And LUPE is rooted in the history of the farm worker movement, of human rights and human dignity. So we continue that legacy in making sure people know that they do have the power to influence what's happening, whether it's on a county level, whether it's on a state level, or whether it's on a national level. And so a lot of times when we're dealing with people who don't have documentation, they're not able to move freely. They're stuck in the space between two borders, one being the checkpoint and the other being the border, the river. So LUPE takes the lead from our members. And the one thing that they keep telling us is that they need protections from deportations. They need protections from family separations. And like you mentioned, some have been here for 20 years and still have no pathway to citizenship at the moment. So part of what we do is making sure that they understand the civic process of interacting with counties, so that when Operation Lone Star gets announced, that we're present at the county level and making sure that county officials are denouncing Operation Lone Star, that none of the counties along the southernmost border accepted the disaster declaration when it was first announced by Governor Greg Abbott. And we didn't do that alone. We did that with organizations like Texas Civil Rights Project, with Arise Adelante, and other community-based organizations here in the Rio Grande Valley, because we're just a segment of many movements, right? And we're all trying to move together towards a place where everybody can live with dignity and respect. And this past legislative session, we actually took as many members as we could to Austin. We protested HB 7 and HB 20. And with other organizations, we were actually able to push back these legislation multiple times in regular sessions, special sessions. And it was something where we had victories, where we showed that we do have the ability to influence these laws. Unfortunately, there's somebody who has a really big ego and has, an agenda a political agenda that it's focused on separating families. It's focused on creating as much damage as possible, with the belief that the more psychological and physical damage that they cause, the less likely people are wanting to stay here or even try to seek asylum here. That is a tool that they use. Unfortunately, a lot of what our families who don't have protections from deportations are going through is not, you can't always see the fear that they have to live with, right? When I was asking some of our members today, like, what does it feel like to have to deal with Operation Lone Star? And they were talking about how it's just an extension of the fear that they already have of being separated from their families, right? It's a fear where a child is telling their parents to make sure that they don't run a stop sign, that their lights are working, because they don't want to come home to a missing parent, right? To having to deal with that separation and that pain and anguish. And it's almost like PTSD, right? They're dealing with this physical and mental anguish on a daily basis because they don't know when they will have protections from deportations. But one thing that they do know is that they're not just going to give up, that it's not just as simple as not doing something and just letting for things to play out. And a lot of what we do is making sure that we're telling the stories of our members and that they're the ones that are leading our campaigns. They're the ones that are deciding on how they want to tackle these issues. You'll see pictures here of our Cumbre de Colonias, which is a convention that we have where our members tell us what the issues they care about and they vote about these issues. And immigration is always at the top of the list. And it's something that we will continue working towards. Even if there's some kind of resolution, there's always more people that need help, and not necessarily help, but need somebody that they can stand next to, right? Because we all have the ability to participate in this process, whether you're undocumented or not, and it's important that we all play our role. Did I miss something? Sorry.
But if there's anything you want to add.
No, thank you all for being here and listening to what we have to say.
Thank you, Sergio. I work with Sergio at LUPE, and I know that the LUPE members are some of the bravest people I've met. And I think sometimes the images that we see of immigrants and asylum seekers, the media tends to portray people as like powerless, right? Or that they don't understand the political context. And I can tell you from our LUPE members and the folks that we've met, like in Matamoros and Reynosa, they can give you the most on-point political analysis of what's going on. Like, they know who Abbott is, they know who Ken Paxton is, they know it's election year, they know Biden, they know Trump. They can explain to you these laws probably better than any of us can in here. And I think we often miss that, right, from the media portrayal of things. The people are stripped of their power and how willing they are to fight, right, for their rights and for their families. So thank you, Sergio, for sharing that. Can we go to the next slide, please? My next question is for Felicia. I'd like to highlight your leadership as a Black woman doing this work. In 2021, as you all see here, you were featured in the LA Times talking about how race intersects with this work, especially for Black migrants, many Haitian migrants and African migrants who cross the camps, and even for yourself as a humanitarian provider. And I want to read a little excerpt, and it's like the kicker of the article that I think sums it up really well. This is, it says, as for the future, last week, Rangel-Samponaro started building her own migrant shelter in Reynosa. Mexican officials initially said that she would be able to accept only Central American families, but Felicia insisted on housing Black migrants too. And then Felicia said, people are uncomfortable when I call out the racism, but imagine how I feel. I'm uncomfortable all of the time. So no, I have no sympathy for people who are feeling uncomfortable because I'm calling it what it is. And you should be uncomfortable, and then maybe you'll stop or tell your friends to stop. So Felicia, could you talk about what your experience has been as a Black leader in this space, and how have you seen anti-Blackness harm the asylum seekers that you work with?
I'm going to try to shave it down. Let me say, being just a minority in this space and leading an NGO, it's good and bad. When we go into the camps, especially the volunteers, they often mistake myself and Victor as asylum seekers. And I mean, that's fine with us. You can take it however you want to take it. But usually, like even 2 weeks ago, we had a volunteer come into the camp and he was like, oh, you speak English, good for you. I said, okay, so you have a good day now. So because of that, Victor and I are able, whenever like something happens or whenever a group of people are running towards the bridge, usually because the group is running after them, but in the media it's portrayed as people rushing the bridge, which is not accurate at all. So Mexican officials will usually come in and get the Americans out. They leave Victor and I every single time. So we get to witness firsthand what other Americans cannot witness because they think we're asylum seekers. So it is a good and a bad. Bad, it's hard being Black in this space because it's usually just myself and Gurney Joseph, Haitian Bridge Alliance. It's just the two of us. And I was asked by that reporter for this article about why I don't think more Black people are on the border. And I told her that would be a long discussion about U.S. racism, generational wealth, how it's not, given to Black people, in fact, slavery. I was like, you can touch upon so many things about why Black people are not in this space, because you can't go a year or two and not get paid. Like, it's not set up like that for Black people. I'm brown people, really. Minorities, it's not set up like that for minorities. Generational wealth is usually white people. So I told the reporter, if Black people had generational wealth and could go 2 or 3 years without getting paid, you would see more Black people here. Of course, they care about their community and what's happening to their people. Of course. It's just not set up that way. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go 2.5 years, almost 3 years without getting paid. That's a hard thing to do. And then the other good side, especially when it comes to Black asylum seekers, they're used to racism is very open in Mexico. Like when the Matamoros encampment started up again, like they couldn't go to the convenience store, they wouldn't rent them apartments, they couldn't go into restaurants. They were openly telling them, we don't serve Black people, get out, get out, get out. And unfortunately at that time, some of our partners, some of the shelters were forcing the Black people to sleep outside on the streets with their children. Victor and I came in and we were just like, no, 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 no. And it took a lot of pushback for a while to get the partners and other places to serve Black people. But I mean, it's helpful when you have a Black person there fighting for you, another Black person. It makes it just a little bit easier, but it's a hard thing, especially when Haitian asylum seekers come up to me and they tell me, like, you don't understand, I'm being discriminated against, I need to get out. And I'm like, I'm Black too, I totally understand. I go, when I walk back into the US, I'm treated the same way you're treated here in Mexico. I'm fighting every day. I fight on both sides of the border. Once they find on the Mexico side I'm Black, I am treated differently. I'm Black when I walk over here, regardless of how this situation looks. I'm Black. So I tell all Haitian asylum seekers, you don't have to tell me, I know. And I'm not going to discriminate against you because I'm discriminated against every time I walk into my own country. So it brings an ease and it changes the conversation. Because now you're not trying to tell me why, like how it feels to be discriminated against. I know how it feels. So now we can move on to what is happening to you. Have you been attacked, kidnapped, assaulted? Let's get down to what the real issue is so I can help you and we can move forward and I can hopefully lead you in the direction that will help you, like your CBP1 application. That, when the application first came out, it was not accepting pictures of Black people. That's just a fact. If you were my color or darker, you were not getting a CBP1 appointment. We had to go back to the US government and show them time again, videos and pictures of how Black people were not being accepted. The racism is built in on both sides of the border. I just don't think most people, because it's hard to keep up with all of those small nuances of what's happening and how is racism going on. But when an application is built in with racism and is only accepting people who are fairer than me, that should just let you know that's just the jump off. But I will end it with that. It's different and it's good and it's bad and it can or cannot be insulting. Like I said, it just, however, I mean, even other Mexican NGOs come in and will mistake Victor and I for asylum seekers. And if we don't accept something from them, they're like, why don't you accept it? It's like, because I told you no, ma'am. I said no. And we have, I mean, it's just interesting to see volunteers from both sides, what they perceive, how you should act as an asylum seeker and what you should be grateful for. And why aren't you taking what I give you? And it's like, okay, well, I just said, we don't correct it. That's not an insult to us. We just, no, thank you. I just told you no. That's it. Accept it. And so it's interesting because I think I get a view that other American volunteers don't get to see. Victor and I get to see all of it from both sides. And how people are treated because they are fleeing for their lives. It's very, at times, very disappointing. I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Felicia, for sharing. And I would encourage you all to read this. LA Times has, you get like one free article if you don't have a subscription, so you all can read it, okay? There's a last question and then we'll open it up to questions from the group. And any of you all feel free to weigh in. Governor Abbott and other anti-immigrant politicians often evoke a very dangerous invasion rhetoric. They say warlike phrases like our state is getting invaded, we need to send more troops, and then they pair this rhetoric with actually deploying more troops and seizing public parks for their military-style operations, like for example in Eagle Pass. Just a few weeks ago, a so-called Take Back Our Border caravan from across the country made its way to Eagle Pass, where armed groups, mostly white men and women, but also Latinos. A lot of Latinos were in there. And they demonstrated through the Take Back Our Border caravan. And just last night at the State of the Union, President Biden shockingly used the slur illegal immigrant in his speech. Can you all comment on the dangers of this rhetoric coming from political leaders? And why do you think this rhetoric is it riles up so many Americans?
Well, I think one thing that I want to highlight from my view, right, is, you know, you had opened saying, how does this affect us in the Valley, right? And to point out that although the Valley counties do not participate on Operation Lone Star on their own, that doesn't mean that we don't have Operation Lone Star forces in our communities, right? And unfortunately, because we don't participate locally, there are very, very few folks who have even been to the US-Mexico border before they're sent on this mission by the National Guard, or they're from the Texas Panhandle, they've never been here, they're new troopers, they're fresh out of the academy, they come down here, or they're Florida State troopers. LUPE and TCRP were sent a TikTok a couple of months ago, a Florida State trooper just straight up asking somebody what their immigration status was. You know, just like a regular old dude from the RGV. Like, he just looked like a lot from the RGV to me. Like, he did not. But this guy, you know, all he gets is that rhetoric, right? All the Florida state troopers, all the National Guardsmen, because it's not just Texas National Guard down here, right? It's Michigan, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Idaho, I think North Dakota, South Dakota are both in there now. Like, it's all, you know, they come from these places and all they have to go on is that rhetoric, right? That they're gonna come down here and they're gonna like crack the skulls of cartel members. And for those of us who grew up in the Valley, right, and like have maybe border patrol, like relationships with border patrol agents who are not from here, right? We're kind of used to hearing from people that they think that they're gonna come down here and they're gonna like arrest the whole cartel and it's gonna be over. And then they come down here and what are they actually doing, right? They're arresting women and children and they're like changing diapers. And all of a sudden it's not the like Rainbow Six mission that they thought that they were gonna come down here to do, right? But they're showing up for a fight. And that puts our communities in danger. I mean, imagine like someone coming in just like already riled up that they're gonna come down here and they're gonna crack down on an invasion. I mean, I from that very caravan that you mentioned, Danny, I saw a woman who at least had the cool head to say like, I came down here and I was shocked at what I'm not seeing, right? I'm down here at the center of the invasion, right? And I do see some people crossing, but it's just handfuls of people. I mean, the numbers are what they are, right? But we live in the richest like country of all time, right? Like, if we can make these numbers manageable, right? And we can also make them look like chaos and an invasion if what is politically motivating for us is to make it do so. And those who are coming in to police our communities have no idea how our communities look, no idea what people who have lived here for their whole lives or who have strong ties to the border look like or act like, and it puts all of our communities at risk.
So yes, I agree with Aron completely. Let me also say that the Sidewalk schools worked in 11 encampments now. It's almost 6 years, 11 encampments. That's so many encampments because asylum seekers are waiting to get legally into this country. They want a future. They want to be able to buy homes, a car. They want medical care. I mean, everything, all people want. And in order to do that, you do need a social security number, a driver's license. So we've now worked inside 11 encampments with thousands and thousands of people because they are waiting to get a CBP-1 appointment right now. They continue to wait. In a border town where our US government tells you as an American, you shouldn't go to because you may get killed. And I believe that was last year when the 2 Black people got killed because they were mistaken for Haitian asylum seekers because they were down the street from the Haitian camp. And they were only in Matamoros for 2.5 hours before those 2 people were killed. So Americans can't go because you may die, but thousands of asylum seekers, y'all can stay there for 8 months. That's okay. And as you get kidnapped, raped, assaulted, all of those things, we will still force you to stay there because you didn't get your CBP-1 appointment. And as your child may be dying of cancer, you're gonna sit there and watch your child die. Now, I don't know about anybody else, I have a child, my child's here tonight. If he was dying of cancer, I would do anything I could to save him, anything. And to blame somebody for caring about their child, that's ridiculous. And to imprison them because they're fleeing for their lives. You're fleeing your country, first of all, for your life. If you're from Haiti, that's just a war right now between gangs. Their president was assassinated in his own home. So as Haitians come here, fleeing their own country, we're then going to punish them if they have some sort of medical emergency or if they were kidnapped, they were just released, and we're going to punish you because you didn't wait for a CBP-1 appointment. And then we're going to blame you on public TV and say, look at them. They're all criminals. None of that is true. None of that's true. And I don't know when all minorities became criminals. The person, unfortunately, the young lady that was killed at the university, that is on him. That is not all Venezuelans everywhere in the world. That is that man. To say because this one person did it, everybody is a murderer and a killer. Look, I was right. That is ridiculous. People need to remember that as they say the words that they say. You cannot put one population because of one person. And also, last but not least, people coming across the border, they are from all over the world. They are not just Mexicans. That blows my mind when I keep hearing that. Like, we have people from Russia living inside the Matamoros encampment right now as we speak. Blonde hair, blue eyes, living inside the Matamoros encampment. We have people from Asia, just all over the world. Africa, I have met so many people now in 6 years I never would have met if I was not doing this job. And what a pleasure and honor it is to meet them and to be exposed to all of these different cultures and to learn from all of these different cultures. I've heard of places I've never heard before because of people coming from around the world. So it's dangerous on so many levels, but no one should just be categorized as just this bad thing, this invasion, because it's not true. Or the Sidewalk School would not continue to grow into clinics and shelters if it was. We still would just be a school sitting on the sidewalk. Instead, we're in 2 cities working 365 days a year nonstop. We get no breaks, no vacations.
I agree. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Aron, where it's like confusion is a benefit for people in power. The more people are confused, the easier it is to stray people in a certain direction and hurt people. So thank you, Dani and Ruido Studios, for having this space so that people living on the border are able to elevate these stories, are able to talk about what's actually happening here. Because the reality is that the vast majority of this nation is hearing that invasion rhetoric. They picture in their minds, the Narcos Netflix series or, whatever other media portrayal you see of the border. Yeah, Sicario. That's what they imagine. And it's important for people like the ones that are here to speak of what's actually happening, not just us, but everybody to share their experiences, because we're the ones who get to tell the story of the border. And when we don't, it's somebody else does for us. And that ends up being misinformation. And we've all heard about the dangers of misinformation. And the reality is that the border is something that motivates people to go out and vote. And it's important that people do go out and vote, but for the right reasons. And hopefully this conversation gets people excited to participate civically, whether it's voting, whether it's showing up to county commissioner meetings or city commissioner meetings, or calling your representatives and speaking up about atrocities, not just here in the border, but all over the world, and how our taxpayers are funding these atrocities.
Thank you. I'm gonna open it to any questions from the audience. We'll just ask you all to come up to speak into the mic so that the folks watching online can hear you.
Hi, my name's Robin Vargas. I guess it's just for all of you. I'm running for state senate. What is things I can say that are gonna convince people that there's not an invasion? Because you guys have all kind of really talked about that, but it's hard to impact people when they're so like, no, this is what's going on. I'm like, I promise you, it's not a zombie apocalypse. Maybe of these terrible people that keep making the rules, but that's why I'm running. I want to be one of those zombies. But if you guys have anything on advice for me, I'd love to hear it.
Thanks.
Sure. it's hard when we work within the political structures that have been set up with, for it throughout this country for generations. We know that it's embedded in white supremacy. We know immigration laws come from xenophobic ideas. We know that people are using the fear of changing demographics as a reason why we should be funding the militarization at the border. And I think it's important to have these conversations, whether you're running for office or not. You're having these conversations with your family. It's not about agreeing, it's just about having these conversations and understanding that there's varying viewpoints in what's happening and going down to our values. Felicia mentioned, something that I think can resonate with whoever you are, it doesn't matter what political party you are, which is if you are dealing with a child or somebody that you love and care about, you're gonna do everything in your power to make sure that person has what they need in order to survive. And that's what it is, right? It's a very human issue. It's not a political issue. And I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. We all have the power to be part of this conversation. It shouldn't just be about shouting. It shouldn't just be about arguing. It should be about sharing and giving people the opportunity to share what they have to say. And hopefully maybe they give you the same opportunity when it's your turn to speak.
I just want to say last week, the Sidewalk School went to Eagle Pass, and we got to see firsthand how over-policed really looked. I thought our area was over-policed. Eagle Pass, that's something really different. We were very surprised by the military, the police officers everywhere. I mean, it's different. But I do remember in the beginning when Shelby Eagle Pass residents actually welcomed them. Remember, they wanted them there in the beginning. They were like, oh yeah, this is great. You're gonna stop this invasion. And now that they're there, Eagle Pass residents are petitioning, getting together, trying to get them out, because it's not as it seems. And we are over-policed, in my opinion, here as well, because this has changed, at least for me while I've lived here. I've never seen so many officers hidden behind trees as I have within this last 2 or 3 months, every few feet from each other. I'm like, who are you looking for? Because I hope you find them, because y'all are everywhere now. Being over-policed just to stop asylum seekers from seeking safety it blows my mind. If people really knew what people are running from, even Venezuela, Honduras, these climate, gangs, political, there's so many different things. But I think Americans just don't sit down to read what is happening in this country that is making all of these people flee in the first place. That's the real part you're missing. Instead of screaming, don't come here, why don't you read to see why thousands of people are fleeing their homes? Because no one is leaving their home for the hell of it. You're not leaving your house, your family, your friend, your car, just, I just want to hang out in the US. No, you leave those things because you're about to die, your kids are about to die. So I'm gonna take the backpack I have, my kids in each hand, and then I'm gonna cross country after country until I can make it to someplace I know is safe, which happens to be the US. And then when I get here, if my child is dying, I'm not gonna wait 5 or 6 months. I'm gonna do whatever I can to get to the US so my child can get the medical care he or she needs so they don't die. And then if you want to prosecute me after that, do it. My kid's alive. But that's what's actually happening now. We are prosecuting people who are fleeing for their lives because Abbott wants to make some sort of point. I'm gonna stop there because I go on such long rants. And so because we work with asylum seekers every single day, we hear their stories. We see what's happening to them. We have watched as someone's child has died in front of them because they weren't allowed to come into the US to receive medical care. We have seen the parents die in front of the child. We've seen it both ways. And then when the child is left by themselves, then somebody else has to fly in to get the child because now the child is orphaned. People really don't get to hear those parts of the story. You tell the story, tell the whole goddamn story from the time they left their home country to the time they got here. Why what happened? Sorry for cursing.
Yeah, not too much to add what everybody said. I agree with 100%. I also just want to highlight that this issue, the issue of immigration in general, is one of the most challenging issues to address at a policy level because it is at the intersection of some of the hardest things this country has had to grapple with. Racism, xenophobia, religious discrimination, foreign policy, global hegemony, the global capitalism and what it does to the global south. I mean, you could go on, and like immigration is, all of these are root causes of like the issue that we have created, right? It's an issue because we have created the issue, right? Someone told me something that really stuck with me one day, that like, to be human is to migrate. That's like literally how we all got here. Like it is like in our epigenetics to migrate. When it's not, things aren't going for us great over here, we go over there. Like that's literally the story of humanity. So this idea that like just $1 more billion of concertina wire or state troopers or whatever is going to solve like this thing that we've decided is a problem that is part of our humanity, just fundamentally misunderstands the problem and all of the root causes of it. And then the last thing I will say is like, what I've really noticed doing this in my own work and in my own life is that the horde, the invasion language is very powerful because it creates a faceless enemy. And whenever folks are asked to reflect on the undocumented or even documented immigrants that they know in their personal life, it's very powerful, right? When folks are undocumented or they're somebody who sought asylum, right? This person was in that horde at one time. But like, you don't want your neighbor or like your kid's soccer coach, right, to be deported. Like, they're great. You want them. Like, we don't know these other people. They're like millions of other great people too, right? And so sometimes it's helpful to like ground people and like, you know these people. You have a lot in common with these people. Has anybody seen the TikTok of the Eagle Pass golf course? So yeah, if you see it, it's amazing. So in Eagle Pass, where the state has commandeered the park, there's a municipal golf course. And so it's open to the public, you can play golf there. And so the part that the state has commandeered is just broken off by like that orange kind of tarp roping. And so there's a TikTok that these guys filmed because they're still using the golf course. And as they're teeing off, all the migrants are like cheering for them. They're like, that was a sick drive. And that one TikTok did tons of views, changed tons of people's perception in those 5 seconds, right? These are just like a bunch of dudes who can appreciate a good golf swing. Right? This is not an invading horde of people. So humanizing and showing them, right, these stories of folks' humanity outside of the victim narrative that we love to show, right? But showing them how we have a lot of similarities goes really far.
Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Robin. We have time for one more question, and then I want to remind everybody we have a reception after this at Cactus Valley, which is like literally on the other street. We have some wine from Nopalito. We have some beautiful art created by asylum seekers from the Sidewalk School. You can see some of it here. There's way more over there, and these folks will be there. Maybe holding a wine can. So if you got questions, you can ask them over there. But we'll take one more question here. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, my name is Tisoc. Yo sé que yo parezco un gringo, pero mi apellido es Treviño. Just wanted to say thank you to all 4 of you for presenting this information. I really love seeing people face to face. I like saying get off Facebook, get face to face. And that's what we're doing here. And this is great. I work a lot. And so I'm unable to come to a lot of events. And it makes me sad. I want to continue and be a part of this conversation. And so I'm thankful for today that my work schedule, I'm going to be in Bronzeville tomorrow. I came from McAllen, and I think about that, like for other people, who are working even more hours than me, coming out even more stressed. And, what I like about my job is I get to talk to people all day, different types of people, and share sort of tidbits about these stories, about these new narratives that we have the responsibility to present, and slip it into the ear of a lesbian detention center employee, or an older white man who he's wearing a Vietnam veteran cap, but he thinks Trump's crazy, and he believes in facts, and we agree on that, and so I love the passion, I love the humor. I think we got to just keep talking to each other and appreciate all this. I don't have a real question so much as just a reflection, perhaps, or if you feel interested in answering, please go ahead. I'm sort of a minority within a minority. I don't believe in God, so I guess that would put me as an atheist, and that's the A. The B is I'm bipolar, I'm bisexual, and I'm bipartisan, so nobody likes being around me, right? I'm just kidding. But yeah, the C, Christian nationalism. One of y'all mentioned a convoy coming down to the border. There was also a Christian nationalist convoy, and who also spin these really terrible stories about us. And so the question is, or the reflection is, how do we navigate talking to our families, or people we meet at work, friends, who were raised in religions and who it works for them? We want to respect that. It's if it helps somebody put extra bit of energy in their step to their day, then that's 100% beautiful. I just don't think we should be trying to force it into their shoes, and so how can we talk about that threat coming from that very loud vocal minority that's also kind of spinning these negative narratives about us while respecting people's beliefs? Thank you.
Sure. I think that's a good question. They tell you don't talk about religion and don't talk about politics, right? People have very strong feelings when you're talking about something that goes against their identity or their perceived values, because I do think that we all have a lot of values that bring us together more than separate us. I don't want to do the same thing that's being done to immigrants, right? Put this faceless label on people and just be like, oh, Christian nationalist, right? Because people then be like, well, am I a Christian nationalist? Because there's actually confusion between that term, and there's been politicians who are like, are you against Christian nationalism? Not realizing that they're rooted in racism, right? And they're like, yeah, we support them. And they're like, oh, wait, do I support them? So I think it's important to have those conversations and be honest about that. But there is a real threat, right? I think we've all seen it, experienced it. Just this morning, doing the morning scroll, and sure enough, a video comes on, and it's somebody donning a red hat, spewing hatred about women's rights to vote, minorities in this country, and saying that we need to go back to a country that's run where only white Christian men can vote. So the ideas are out there, but they're not as many people as we think they are. And a lot of confusion is out there where people think they identify with this label, but they don't even understand what this label is a lot of the times. Because the word nationalism is like, oh, you're proud to be an American, right? We're taught to be proud to be an American. So I think it's important to have this conversation. It's important to talk to people, and at the same time, not just demonize people that maybe don't even understand their own beliefs and values until they start questioning them.
Yeah, I co-sign that. And I will just say to what I had mentioned to the end of the last question too is, I know for those of us, so I am transgender, right? And to many people, I pass as a cis male, and I often have to out myself to them, right? And I choose to do that in certain situations where I've gained enough of that person's trust that I think that knowing that I am a transgender person is probably going to help them in having a better understanding of the trans community, right? And so I think in that same vein, especially a lot of the views that folks espouse in that like white Christian nationalist bent come out of fear, right? That is a political movement that is grounded in fear about what it means to have like folks of more, different religious backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, things like that. That is like almost like a distilled narrative of this immigration narrative that we get, right? About what it means to have those people being in community. And so the more that folks, like it's difficult and we don't always have to do this work, right? As folks who are in minority demographics, but those of us who feel safe enough and willing to do that, that goes a long way to dispel a lot of that fear and start to undo a lot of that rhetoric about what it looks like to live in a society in which folks look different. We can see on the news that there are lots of people who are unconvinced by that, and they are very unapologetic about the way that they want the laws of this country to be written. But those folks are emboldened by the, most folks not understanding what's going on, or not understanding that they're already in community with folks who are not a part of that agenda, and what driving a white Christian nationalist agenda actually would mean, right? Your friends, your neighbors, the people you love and want to spend time with, it means actively oppressing them. Like, are you gonna do that? Most people will back away from that point. But a lot of us kind of have to stand up, right? And put ourselves out there a little bit, assert ourselves a little bit in, in a way that's safe for us.
Thank you, Aron, and thank you, Tisa, for asking that. I wanted to add a little bit on, I think how polarized the country is and what we hear about like our neighbors and people is, I used to, for example, if I saw a Confederate flag outside of your home, I'd be like, nope, great, I'm not gonna go there. And now it's like, even if sometimes I see like an American and Texan flag, I'm like, I don't know, right? And I had a friend kind of check me recently and was like, why, right? And I found that the polarization was also kind of getting to me, and that I wasn't giving myself a chance, like as a queer person, to have like a relationship with people, right? Or see past like so many just polarized talking points. And like I mentioned, I work at LUPE, and LUPE is a very intergenerational space. Looks a lot like your family carne asadas, right? A space that you wouldn't necessarily say is like the most out and proud queer space. And yet, honestly, it's with those members sometimes when I feel the safest, because they might not know about the pronouns, they don't know the flags, right? They don't know about that stuff. But I know if they ever saw someone be mean to me or disrespect me, even if they didn't fully understand what was behind it, I know those señoras would be the first ones, right, to be like, absolutely not. And I know you've had that experience too, right, Aron, where it's like people that we were kind of scared about, like, oh, what's this person gonna say? And they're the first ones to be like, love you, and they mess it up sometimes, the terms, but they always come around, right? And I think in conversations about immigration, sometimes we lose our humanity and lose seeing each other as people, right? That we draw these huge generalizations with each other that we're not even sometimes able to have conversations with like the people that we grew up with or that raised us, right? And if we stop that, if we can't even do that with the people that we love the most, then how are we gonna do that with people who are seeking asylum, right? Then we may never really know their names. And so I appreciate every single one of you for participating in the conversation. This is, I think, where, let's go to the next one, yeah. I think it's in these spaces where it's like a small group of people having these conversations on ideas where hopefully you all get to go home after the reception and tell this to somebody else, right? Or try to have a conversation with someone that maybe you've been scared to talk about, but maybe you can, approach it differently. So yeah, thank you all so much. And before we go, I want to thank all of our partners. It took literally a whole village to put this event together. Starting with, of course, the Sidewalk School, Texas Civil Rights Project, LUPE, us at Ruido Studios. I want to give a special shout out to two people, Fatima Garza, who's over there, and Ruby Fuentes, who's back there. Fatima's our projects manager at Rio Studios, and Ruby is one of our fellows who's placed with the Sidewalk School. And they worked really, really hard in the last weeks to put this event together. So thank you both so much. Of course, the folks at Entero, Andres in the back, and C over here for lending us the space. We're gonna see the folks at Cactus Valley, the folks at Poets Against Walls, who, if y'all follow us in the reception, you all get to hear some of their beautiful poetry. And then El Nopalito, if you are a wine drinker, they did get us some cans of natural wine so that we can look at the art, and we got some cheese and stuff. So to follow up, soothe a little bit after this very difficult conversation. But thank you all so much. Please join us at Cactus Valley right after this.